Donald Trump was, and I talked about this on Facebook earlier this morning. Donald Trump said, since the president will not be doing a Super Bowl interview, Trump went to Truth Social and he said, crooked Joe Biden has just announced that he will not be doing a big Super Bowl interview. A great decision. He can't put two sentences together. I would be happy to replace him. Would be ratings gold, Trump says. And so I asked on Facebook, and I welcome your thoughts, would you, there are a number of people like me that don't plan on watching the Super Bowl. And so I asked, would you tune in then at least to the halftime show if it meant catching the interview with Trump? I'm like, I would do it. Absolutely. I would be there in a heartbeat, I said. And so getting a lot of reaction from that, I always appreciate. And thanks so much to those of you who follow me on Facebook. I'm easy to find. Just Greg Belfridge, just search me by name at Facebook. Follow me there. And I love hearing from you. So, and we have a lot more fun on Facebook. I try to keep life a lot lighter on Facebook than we're able to do so here on things here. Sometimes the news of the day can get to be a bit heavy, frustrating for me a lot of times. Also, Donald Trump was, I mentioned this earlier this morning, he was on Newsmax last night, and he was talking about the border. Newsmax also talked to pollsters yesterday, John McLaughlin of McLaughlin and Associates and John Zogby will say that they're both pollsters, show Trump leading Biden by 4 points. And the words of McLaughlin here I really appreciate because, he said, we had numbers on Friday where Trump's ahead of Biden 47-43 nationally. It's been pretty consistent. And he said, I think our colleague John Zogby has seen the same thing. So he said this poll that he's talking about was a partnership of NBC with Hart Research and Public Opinion Strategies. And he said it was a bipartisan poll that was not done by Trump people. Well, this was not a Trump poll. NBC and Hart Research. And so McLaughlin says now of this poll, he said President Trump has a decisive lead. And this is because Joe Biden has been failing. And when they get so desperate as talking about convictions, it's ridiculous, he said. Because in our national poll that we posted on our website, you have 69% of all voters say politics played a role in the indictments, and another 57% say Joe Biden played a role in these indictments. And he said the whole thing is a sham. He said it's undermining democracy. You've got Joe Biden indicting his leading political opponent. This should not be happening in America, and the voters see it. That's why Donald Trump's winning. Oh, yes. So then Zogby said his polling also shows Trump 4 points ahead. And he said, so either we're both outliers or we're in the mainstream. I think we're in the mainstream, Zogby said. And he said, the Trump team has got to take suburban women voters into consideration. And he said they're reachable on the issue of abortion. That we saw them swing away from education, cultural issues from 21 to 2022. He said where they were pivotal in the Democrats stemming the tide. That is certainly something that Trump has to contend with. Yeah, the issue of Trump and women has been a big issue. Can Trump find a way to appeal to women? Now, we've got a number of women who say they're absolutely in Trump's camp. They're absolutely behind Trump. Whether there are enough, we'll see. And whether that's an issue, these pollsters say it is. I'm not a pollster, but he said, as we speak right now, Trump is leading at 4 or 5 points in this kind of milieu is something that turns heads. It's a significant lead at this point. Significant lead that Trump has, according to these pollsters. Speaking of Trump, he was on Newsmax, as I mentioned yesterday, and we were talking about this earlier in regard to the border. Trump just saying, close the border. I mean, I did it. Take action on just close the border. You could do that. I did it. Didn't need Congress, just do it. And during this, the same interview with Newsmax, Trump was talking about tax cuts. And he said if Democrats succeed in unwinding the tax cuts that were enacted, it will lead to the biggest tax hike in the nation's history, he said. So the bill he's referring to was the Tax Cuts and Job Act of 2017. So that slashed the corporate tax rate from 35 to 21%, reduced rates at almost all levels of taxable income. It repealed personal and dependent exemptions, but it doubled the child tax credit from $1,000 to $2,000, created a $500 tax credits for dependents not eligible for the child tax credit, nearly doubled the standard deduction. So those tax cuts are set to expire in 2025. And Trump told Newsmax, he said Democrats and the president are itching to do away with them. Trump said they want to raise your taxes by 4 or 5 times, he said. If they end the Trump tax cuts, it will be the largest tax increase in the history of our country, and they want to do that. Trump said they have hats out there, not made by me, with slogans, Trump was right about everything. And Trump said, I think I've been right about everything. What haven't I been right about? Typical. But Trump is right. He is right about this. That's why he makes me laugh, I think, so much. It's the way he approaches this. The economy, as I have told you, I just think that continues to be the number one issue with voters. We continue to see that. Border is also up there. Border, in fact, recently has even surpassed the economy. But the economy remains one of the most important issues for voters. It's one of the reasons we talk about it so much here. And so Trump talking about the economy. And he said the economy was in a good place during his presidency. But because of the 2020 election, he said the economy has taken a turn for the worse under Biden. Says everything worked under me. It all worked. We had the greatest economy in history. I got the largest tax cuts in history. I got the largest regulation cuts in history. I rebuilt the military. Everything was going great. And then we had this catastrophe of an election. I think COVID-19 was part of that, too. He said, I got more votes in the election than any sitting president in history by far, not even by a little bit. That was among Donald Trump's comments when he was on Newsmax yesterday. Pretty interesting, especially on the border. I think Trump is just... Well, we're talking about Trump, and then I'll move on to some other things here this morning. the issue of the Colorado ballot, and that one is, as you know, in front of the U.S. Supreme Court. And Trump's legal team filed a 30-page brief yesterday arguing that Trump should remain on the Colorado primary ballot. And among the reasons that they detailed, they said, so the Supreme Court will hear arguments in the case beginning this Thursday. So Trump's lawyers then characterized the case. These are the last legal filings. And they said they called it anti-democratic. They said at a time when the United States is threatening sanctions against the socialist dictatorship in Venezuela for excluding the leading opposition candidate for president from the ballot, the Colorado voters who brought the case against Trump are asking this court to impose that same anti-democratic measure at home. So they're comparing it, Trump's lawyers are comparing it to what happened in Venezuela. And they also said there was no insurrection. President Trump did not incite anything. President Trump did not engage in anything that constitutes insurrection, the lawyers said. So we'll see what happens at the U.S. Supreme Court. Again, Trump's lawyers making their final briefings yesterday, and then vocal arguments will be made coming up on Thursday. And that remains a big story. Also, the House Rules Committee has approved the impeachment articles against Alejandro Mayorkas. He's the Secretary of Homeland Security. Those were approved yesterday. So that now tees up a floor vote tomorrow as they work to convince. Some are holding out on this issue. We'll see how it goes. But Mayorkas, now that goes to the entire House floor. What Mayorkas has done, I think, is just unconscionable. I think many of us, the way we look at that. So they approved a rule yesterday permitting the lower chamber to consider the articles of impeachment against Mayorkas. And we'll see where it goes from here. You remember President Joe Biden and those files he had in his garage at home and the documents that he had. This is at his home in Delaware, where he parks his Corvette. Yeah, there. Robert Hur is the special counsel who was leading that investigation then into the president's handling. He was vice president at the time. But how he handled these classified documents. And Axios has a story on this, that Hur is apparently close to making his final determination here, and Axios says that Biden aides are not expecting criminal charges in this case, but they believe that Hur's report is going to include embarrassing details about how Biden stored documents, possibly with photos. So they're worried about this, what the photos and what this is going to show as to how the president handled these documents. And so according to these Biden insiders now, they say even if there are no criminal charges, the report's details could be politically damaging. I've got to wonder how they wouldn't be. I mean, you'd have to be living so far outside of reality if you're actually following these things. And so the president, as you know, remember some time ago, he said, talking about these documents in his garage, he said, by the way, my Corvette is in a locked garage. So it's not like they're sitting out on the street, which makes me laugh. That's the way Joe Biden is trying to downplay it. Well, my Corvette's in the garage. It's a locked garage. And that's how he's trying to say, oh, it's no big deal. No big deal. Nothing to see here. Isn't it amazing? I always think of Frank Drebin from Police Squad when the fireworks factory is exploding behind him and he's out there on the megaphone telling the crowd, move on. Nothing to see here. Nothing to see. That's how, I mean, that's this administration. Nothing to see here. Meanwhile, the White House is exploding behind them. Give me a break. Nothing to see here. Here's the thing, and we talked about this at length previously, and I repeat it for those who may be new to the program. Welcome, by the way. It's great to have you along. The Senator Ted Cruz has talked about this at length. These classified documents do not walk out of the classified settings. How did Joe Biden get those documents out of a classified setting in the first place? Because when senators, for instance, go in to see these documents, they go in, they see them, they view them, the documents are left there in a secure place. Any notes that the senators take must be left behind. So if you're taking notes to yourself, but this is significant, this is important, you're jotting those things down, you cannot take your notes with you. So you can't scribble down what you're seeing and then go out and hold a news conference and go, this is what the document says. Now you got to leave your notes behind. So how in the world did Joe Biden, a vice president, get those documents at his home in Delaware in the first place? How did they leave the White House? How did they leave a secure area? I mean, those are questions. Forget about his Corvette being locked in the garage. That's a joke. He's just throwing that out there. That's nonsense. The question is, how did he get them at home in the first place? Same thing with Mike Pence. Mike Pence, and because of all of this with Biden, Mike Pence went through all of his documents, and he found he had taken some documents and immediately turned them over. I appreciate that these officials are turning them over. How is it that they are winding up with those documents in the first place? That continues to be a question to which the American people have not received an answer.